Of friendship, Francis Bacon. It had been hard for him that despite it to have put more truth and untruth together in few words. Then in that space, whatsoever is delighted in solitude is either a wild beast or a god. For it's most true that a natural and a secret hatred and aversion towards society in any man has somewhat of the savage beast. But it's most untrue that it should have any character at all of the divine nature, except it proceed not out of a pleasure in solitude, but out of a love and desire to sequester a man's self for a higher conversation, such as is found to have been falsely and friendly in some of the heathen, as Epimenides the Candian, Numa the Roman, Empedocles the Sicilian, and Apollonius of Tyana. And truly and really, in divers of the ancient hermits and holy fathers of the church. But little do men perceive what solitude is, and how far it extendeth. For a crowd is not company, and faces are but a gallery of pictures, and talk but a twinkling symbol. Where there is no love, the Latin adage metteth with it a little. Magna civitas, magna solitudo. Because in a great town friends are scattered, so that there is not that fellowship, for the most part, which is in less neighborhoods. But we may go further and affirm most truly that it's a mere and miserable solitude to want true friends, without which the world is but a wilderness. And even in the sense also of solitude, whosoever in the frame of his nature and affections is unfit for friendship, he taketh it for the beast, and not from humanity. A principal fruit of friendship is the ease and discharge of the fullness and swellings of the heart, which passions of all kinds do cause and induce. We know diseases of stoppings and suffocations are the most dangerous in the body, and it's not much otherwise in the mind. You may take sarja to open the liver, steel to open the spleen, flowers of sulfur for the lungs, castoreum for the brain, but no receipt openeth the heart, but a true friend, to whom you may impart griefs, joys, fears, hopes, suspicions, counsels, and whatsoever lieth upon the heart to oppress it in a kind of civil shrift or compassion. It's a strange thing to observe how high are read great kings and monarchs do set upon this fruit of friendship, whereof we speak so great as they possess it many times at the hazard of their own safety and greatness. For princes, in regard of the distance of their fortune from that of their subjects and servants, cannot gather this fruit except to make themselves capable thereof. They raise some persons to be, as it were, companions and almost equals to themselves, which many times sorteth to inconveniences. The modern languages give unto such persons the name of favorites or privados, as if it were matter of grace or conversation. But the Roman name attained the true use and cause thereof, naming them participes curarum. For it's that which tieth the knot, and we see plainly that it hath been done, not by weak and passionate princes only, but by the wisest and most politic that ever reigned, who have oftentimes joined to themselves some of their servants, whom both themselves have called friends, and allowed other likewise to call them in the same manner, using the word which is received between private men, alcela. when he commanded Rome raised Pompey, after surnamed the Great, to that height, that Pompey vaunted himself for Sylla's overmatch. For when he had carried the consulship for a friend of his against the pursuit of Sylla, and that Sylla did a little resent thereat, and began to speak great, Pompey turned upon him again, and in effect bade him be quiet. For that more men adored the sun rising than the sun setting. With Julius Caesar, Decimus Brutus had obtained that interest as he set it down in his testament. For a year in remainder after his nephew, and this was the man that had power with him to draw him forth to his death. For when Caesar would have discharged the Senate in regard of some ill presages, and especially a dream of Calpurnia, this man lifted him gently by the arm out of his chair, telling him he hoped he would not dismiss the Senate till his wife had dreamed a better dream, and it seemeth his favor was so great as Antonius, in a letter which is recited verbatim in honor of Cicero's Philippics, calleth him Benefica, which, as if he had enchanted Caesar, Augustus raised Agrippa, though of mean birth, to that height, as when he consulted with Maecenas about the marriage of his daughter Julia, Maecenas took the liberty to tell him that he must either marry his daughter to Agrippa or to take away his life. There was no third way. He had made him so great with Tiberius Caesar. Sejanus had ascended to that height, as the two were termed and reckoned as a pair of friends. Tiberius in a letter to him said, Haec pro amicitia nostranan occultavi, and the whole Senate dedicated an altar to friendship as to a goddess. In a respect of the great dearness of friendship between them two, the like or more was between Septimius Severus and Plautianus. For he forced his eldest son to marry the daughter of Plautianus, and would often maintain Plautianus in doing affronts to his son, and did write also in a letter to the Senate by these words, I love the man so well as I wish he may overlive me. Now if this princess had been as a Trojan or a Marcus Aurelius, a man might have thought that this had proceeded of an abundant goodness of nature. But being men so wise, of such a strength and severity of mind, and so extreme lovers of themselves as all these were, it proveth most plainly that they found their own felicity, though as great as ever happened to mortal men, but as an half peace, except they both have a friend to make it entire, and yet which is more, they were princes that had wives, sons, nephews, and yet all this could not supply the confront of friendship. It's not to be forgotten what Cominius observed of his first master, Duke Charles the Hardy, namely, that he would communicate his secrets with none, and least of all those secrets which troubled him most. Whereupon he goeth on, and said that towards his later time, that closeness did impair, and a little perish his understanding. Surely Cominius might have made the same judgment also, if it had pleased him, of his second master, Louis the XI, whose closeness was indeed his tormentor. The parable of Pythagoras is dark, but true. Corne edito, it not the heart. Certainly, if a man would give it a heart phrase, those that want friends to open themselves unto are carnivals of their own hearts. But one thing is most admirable, wherewith I will conclude this first fruit of friendship, which is that this communicating of a man's self to his friend works two contrary effects. For it redoubleth joys and cutteth griefs in halves. For there is no man that imparteth his joys to his friend, but he joyeth the more, and no man that imparteth his griefs to his friend, but he grieveth the less. So that it's in truth of operation upon a man's mind, of like virtues as the alchemist used to attribute to their stone for man's body, that is, worketh all contrary effects, but still to the good and benefit of nature. But yet, without praying in aid of alchemism, there is a manifest image of this in the ordinary course of nature, for in bodies union strengtheneth and cherisheth any natural action, and on the other side weakeneth and dulleth any violent impression, and even so it's of mind. The second fruit of friendship is helpful and sovereign for the understanding, as the first is for the affections. For friendship maketh indeed a fair day in the affections from storm and tempest, but it maketh daylight in the understanding out of darkness and confusion of thoughts. Neither is this to be understood only of faithful counsel, which a man receiveth from his friend. But before you come to that, certain it is that whosoever hath his mind fraught with many thoughts, his ears and understanding do clarify and break up. In communicating and discoursing with another, he toucheth his thoughts more easily, he marshalleth them more orderly, he seeth how they look when they are tuned into words. Finally, he waxeth wiser than himself, and that more by an hour's discourse than by a day's meditation. It was well said by Theomistocles to the king of Persia that space was like cloth of arras, opened and put abroad, whereby the imagery doth appear in figure, whereas in thoughts they lie but as in facts. Neither is this second fruit of friendship in opening the understanding restrained only to such friends as are able to give a man counsel. They indeed are best, but even without that a man learneth of himself and bringeth his own thoughts to light, and watteth his wits as against stone, which itself cares not. In a word, a man were better relate himself to a statue or a picture than to suffer his thoughts to pass in smoother. And now, to make his second fruit of friendship complete, that other point which lieth more open and falleth within vulgar observation, which is faithful counsel from a friend. Heraclitus said, well, in one of his enigmas, dry light is ever the best. And certain it's that the light that a man receiveth by counsel from another is drier and purer than that which cometh from his own understanding and judgment, which is ever infused and drenched in his affections and customs. So as there is a much difference between the counsel that a friend giveth and that a man giveth himself, as there is between the counsel of a friend and of a flatterer. For there is no such flatterer as is a man's self, and there is no such remedy against flattery of a man's self as the liberty of a friend. Counsel is of two sorts, the one concerning manners, the other concerning business. For the first, the best preservative to keep the mind in health is the faithful admonition of a friend. The calling of a man's self to a strict account is a medicine, sometimes too piercing and corrosive. Reading good books of morality is a little flat and dead. Observing our faults in others is sometimes improper for our case. But the best receipt, best I say to work, the best to take, is the admonition of a friend. It is a strange thing to behold what gross errors and extreme absurdities many, especially of a great sort, do commit for want of friend to tell them of them, to the great damage both of their fame and fortune. For, as St. James said, they are as men that look sometimes into a glass and presently forget their own shape and favour. As for business, a man may think, if he win, that two eyes see no more than one, or that a gamester seeth always more than a looker on, or that a man in anger is as wise as he that hath said over the 24 letters, or that a man musket may be shot off as oil upon the arm, as upon a raised and such other fond and high imaginations, to think himself all in all. But when all is done, the help of good counsel is that which sitteth business straight. And if any man think that he will take counsel, but it shall be by pieces, asking counsel in one business of one man and in another business of another man, it's oil, that is to say, better perhaps, than if he asked none at all, but he runneth two dangers. One, that he shall not be faithfully counselled, for it's a rare thing, except it be from a perfect and entire friend, to have counsel given, but such as shall be bowed and crooked to some hands which he had that giveth it. The other, that he shall have counsel given, heartful and answered, though with good meaning, and mixed partly of mischief and partly of remedy, even as if you would call a physician that is thought good for the cure of the disease you complain of, but is unacquainted with your body, and therefore may put you in way for present cure, but overthroweth your health in some other kind, and so cure the disease and kill the patient. But a friend that is wholly acquainted with a man's estate will beware, by furthering any present business, how he dasheth upon other inconvenience, and therefore rest not upon scattered counsels. They will rather distract and mislead than settle and direct. After these two noble fruits of friendship, peace in the affections and suffer of the judgment, followeth the last fruit, which is like the pomegranate, full of many kernels, I mean 8, and bearing a part in all actions and occasions. Here, the best way to represent to life the manifold use of friendship is to cast and see how many things there are, which a man cannot do himself, and then it will appear that it is a sparing speech of the ancients to say that a friend is another himself, for that a friend is far more than himself. Men have their time and die many times in desire of some things which they principally take to heart, the bestowing of a child, the finishing of a work, or the like. If a man have a true friend, he may rest almost secure that the care of those things will continue after him, so that a man hath, as it were, two lives in his desires. A man hath a body, and that body is confined to a place, but where friendship is, all offices of life are as it were granted to him and his deputy. For he may exercise them by his friend. How many things are there which a man cannot, with any force or comeliness, say or do himself? A man can scarce allege his own merits with modesty, much less extol them. A man cannot sometimes brook to supplicate or beg, and a number of like. But all these things are graceful in a friend's mouth, which are blushing in a man's own. So again, a man's person hath many proper relations which he cannot put off. A man cannot speak to his son but as a father, to his wife but as a husband, to his enemy but upon terms, whereas a friend may speak as the case requires, and not as it sorteth with the person. But to enumerate these things were endless. I have given the rule where a man cannot faithfully play his own part. If he have not a friend, he may quit the stage.